Part 3. The Formidable Mr. Rockefeller. By the end of 1872, Rockefeller's empire stretched across 3 states. His refineries in Cleveland supplied oil to Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, but then the railroads turned against him. They always had been his biggest expense, most valuable asset, and constant bane, and now they were going to be his biggest threat. The Pennsylvania Railroad started building their own refineries, which cut off Rockefeller's access to the East Coast markets he had built so long to supply. This was war, and Rockefeller knew it. So he did what he had done before, but this time on a larger scale. He cut prices to force customers to sign long-term contracts, and he cut them deeply, even if it meant operating at a loss. Any railroad that refused to play ball would not get any shipments. If they still wanted to pick up business from other producers, they could, but it would be at a much higher rate. It was classic Rockefeller business warfare. Rockefeller also engaged in public relations warfare. He took full-page ads in newspapers around the country criticizing the railroads for their greedy behavior. And it worked because people hated the railroads, and the railroads knew it. Most of the smaller refiners could not afford such a drastic price cut, so they went out of business, or sold out to Rockefeller. The majors could, but they didn't want to because that would give him too much power. So they held out, cutting prices for the shippers and hoping for help from the government. That's when labor strikes erupted, led by 2 men who would become famous for leading the most epic labor strike in US history. Neither one of them worked for Rockefeller. One was a railroad man named Eugene V. Debs, founder of the American Railway Union. The other was a former hatter named Samuel Gompers, who founded the American Federation of Labor. They were both fighting for better working conditions. And when the strikes failed, there were riots in the streets of Chicago and St. Louis. People were angry at Rockefeller, and the railroads and the politicians were getting nervous. That's when Rockefeller made his move. He called a secret meeting with the heads of all the major railroads and offered them a dominant new deal. He would no longer charge them a competitive rate for shipments. He would charge them a flat rate, the same whether they shipped a lot or a little. That way, they could count on his business no matter what. In return, they would give him control of their oil distribution networks, their warehouses, their locomotives, their entire delivery system. In effect, he was buying off the railroads. He paid them to make him the most powerful man in the country. As far as oil was concerned, Rockefeller controlled the entire distribution network from coast to coast, from Canada to Mexico, and he would soon control the production as well. That would make him the most formidable rich man in the world, maybe the most formidable rich man in history. But first, we have to tell you about another rich man, who is about to make an even bigger fortune than Rockefeller. Chapter 6. The Controlling Mr. Rockefeller. It was 1881, and John D. Rockefeller was at the top of his game. He was the richest man in America and probably the richest man in the world. But he wasn't satisfied. By 1881, he had total control of the distribution of oil in the United States. But he didn't control the wells that produced the oil. He didn't control the pipelines that transported it. He didn't control the storage tanks that held it. He didn't even control the refineries that processed it. He could buy all those services from someone else, but then he would be at the mercy of those suppliers. He needed to take the next step, but how? He thought back to how he got where he was. In the beginning, he had used a system of payoffs to eliminate competition in Cleveland. Then he had gone to Pittsburgh and used low prices to eliminate competition there. Then he had gone to Philadelphia and eliminated the middlemen. Now he couldn't do those things anymore. He already controlled all the refiners in the country and he had bought off the railroads. So what else could he do? Then he had a flash of insight. Why not apply the same methods to the oil fields themselves? Why not go into production? The idea was brilliant, but it was risky. Rockefeller had never run anything but a refinery. He didn't know anything about drilling for oil or pumping it or transporting it, but he knew how to put together a team. He sent out feelers to the best managers in the country, the kind of men who could build him a great oil company. One was a chemical engineer named Henry M. Flagler. Another was a civil engineer named William G. M. Hall. A third was a geologist named George B. They weren't sure what they were getting into, but they were excited to find out. And what they found was a whole new way to run a business. For the first time, Rockefeller applied his system to something from start to finish. He paid off the local landowners to lease him their oil rights. He built pipelines to move the oil from the wells to the refineries. He built storage tanks to hold the oil until it could be refined. He built refineries to process the oil into kerosene and gasoline. He built tankers to ship the finished product to the distribution centers. He even built retail outlets to sell the gasoline directly to consumers. That meant he could set the price for each step of the process. He could keep track of the quality of each step of the process. and he could make a profit on each step of the process. The result was an unprecedented level of efficiency and profitability. No company in the world had ever done anything like it. And they weren't done yet. They went to work solving the problem of Ohio's skunk oil. Skunk oil smelled so bad it wouldn't sell, but chemists hadn't been able to figure out why. So Rockefeller put a team of scientists on the task, and they discovered that it was full of sulfur. They experimented with removing the sulfur and boiler. They created pure oil, but they didn't stop there. They experimented with refining the oil even further, and they discovered a whole new product, gasoline. At first, it was a waste product that they had to get rid of. But then the horseless carriage came along, and then the automobile came along, and suddenly gasoline became very valuable. Rockefeller was ready for it. He had built an empire based on supplying products people didn't even know they wanted. And now he had supplied them with the fuel to power those products. He was in complete control. Except he wasn't. The panic of 1893 hit the United States hard. Prices fell, factories closed, and people lost their jobs. Rockefeller's empire felt the pain, and he did something he had never done before. He laid off workers. The public hated it. Suddenly, the rich man who had lifted millions out of poverty was keeping people from doing the same. And that's when he met a man named Frederick Gates. Gates was a Baptist minister who ran a small school for poor children. He had no idea what Rockefeller wanted with him, but he agreed to meet anyway. When they met, Rockefeller told him he needed someone to manage his wealth, and Gates said he was the man for the job. For the first time, Rockefeller let someone else handle his money. It gave him time to focus on the more important parts of his empire. And Gates proved to be a worthy understudy. Meanwhile, Rockefeller's son, John Jr., was starting to learn the family business. He began making his own investments and showing a real aptitude for power. He was only 22 years old, but his father was grooming him to take over someday. And when that happened, the Rockefeller system of power would be unstoppable. Hi everyone. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and watch another one.